Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Huddle Up with Howard. I'm Mike Claiborne, and of course, you see Howard Richards there, and we've got a lot of things to talk about, Howard. We'll stay on the college scene this week because there's a lot of things that have taken place since our last chat. The bowl season has been decided. So we've got 42 games. Are there 84 good teams that are actually, I know they meet the requirement of being bowl eligible. There's one thing to be eligible, there's another thing to be worthy. So do we really have 40 or 84 teams that we think people are going to pay attention to?
It depends on who you ask. If you ask the fan bases of those schools that are going, they will say yes. Most of them will, not all of them.
I tell you what, the coach will, because he's got a reason to justify his existence by getting into a bowl game, and he uses all the things from recruiting to extra practices and stuff like that. But one of the things that I've noticed when we see some of these bowl games, maybe some of the new ones or some of the ones that don't really feature well-known names or schools, there's nobody there. I mean, they play in these massive stadiums, and you look up and the cameras don't like to pan up too much because there's nothing but empty seats.
You know, what these bowls should do is use what was done during the pandemic last year, that a lot of NBA games especially, and get the cardboard cutouts and fill the stands with.
They're stashed somewhere.
It has come down to that. Yeah. I don't even know if some of these bowls, if you give away tickets, if people will even show up. But I think that, listen, the bowl season has been saturated, and you mentioned 42 bowls. That's a lot. And I've always, listen, I'm for Mizzou going to a bowl game, but, you know, to become bowl eligible, you have to win only 6 games. With a 12-game college season, 6-6 is average. So how do we, I think maybe the importance or the allure of bowl games will be better if you made the rule that teams had to win 7 games or more. I don't know, but here's the other thing. Once the college football playoff is expanded, a lot of these bowl games are going to go away. That's just what I believe, because viewership will go way down. Yeah. So I think that's what college football, you know, the evolution of it in so many different ways, that's probably, it wouldn't surprise me if that's the next step.
I'm going to come back to that subject in a minute. I want to stay on the subject, though, of the bowls. Is there, other than the playoffs, is there one matchup you're looking forward to other than Missouri and Army?
You know, I don't know. I think there's some of the next tier teams. The New Year's Day 6 bowls are probably going to be the best bowl games. I haven't really looked at the actual matchups other than the day that they were announced, and hadn't studied them. But, you know, what does a team like Kentucky do as they continue to ascend up the ladder in the SEC East? Have they reached? Has it reached its ceiling? You know, will they continue to improve? Teams like Oklahoma, now that Lincoln Riley has moved on to USC, what happens there? You know, what's that program going to look like? So I think the teams, those games will be interesting to see. You know, how they, you know, who coaches, and, you know, what it does to their recruiting now that these coaches have moved on. You know, there are a lot of coaches movements this year. There's been a lot of coach movement, I should say. Mario Cristobal from Oregon to Miami, Billy Napier to Florida, certainly Brian Kelly to LSU. So the landscape of college football is going to change. How much, we just don't know, but it'll make for an interesting offseason to see some of the moves, and you know, see, you know, next week, 6 days is the early signing date. We'll see how that affects schools, and, you know, as they attract, you know, their top recruits. You know, Missouri, I understand its recruiting class has kind of moved up to, I think, maybe number 11 for whatever reason. So That's exciting. Even, they finished 6-6 and they're going to a bowl game playing against Army. But you have to look towards the future with, all the talk about Luther Burden III coming in, who's going to play quarterback A in the bowl game, and who possibly may be the opening day starter at quarterback for Missouri in 2022. So lots of things that the scenes are being set right now during bowl season, I believe. And obviously we'll continue into the offseason with spring football.
All right, I'm going to touch on Mizzou here for a second because I want to get back to the coaches here in a minute as well. Missouri's playing Army. Army is Service Academy. They run the triple option. And it's kind of like when you and I were in high school and Shama and I used to run a single wing. It's hard to stop when you don't see it on a regular basis. And while Army may not be physically on the same level as far as alignment are concerned, man, they rush the ball. I mean, they run the ball and they dare you to stop them. They may throw it from time to time. So the question is, with Missouri and their defense being up and down this year, what sort of problems will a team like Army pose for Missouri?
Right now, you have to say big problems because we know what Army's going to do. I'd be shocked if Army scrapped its normal game plan and started throwing the ball around. I just don't see that happening at this point. So for Missouri, obviously it's been 4 days since they've learned their opponent. They know what it's going to take to stop this team, right? Because they've got a lot of speed at those skill positions. The focus has to be on assignment football defensively. And now that this is your only opponent, you don't have to look ahead to any other opponents. You can specifically work with your defense and your defensive schemes and make sure that these young men understand what it takes to stop a team like the triple option. You may have to go back to the days of Billy Sims at Oklahoma to look out some of the teams defended them and see if there's any new wrinkles that you can find out. But it's going to take to me, it's going to be a monumental effort for Missouri to be able to stop a team like this. You remember that bowl game like 10, 11 years ago when Missouri played Navy? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, don't want – Missouri wants to avoid a repeat of that.
Yeah. Period. But, I'm going to tell you something. The thing, it's while Army may appear to be a challenge, the basic rules of football apply.
Yes, they do.
Don't let the guy get to your outside shoulder. Make sure you stay low and stay at home. Don't chase because they always come back with counters and they come back with reverses. So while it sounds simple, I think if you just maintain those three things and maybe add a little water here and there, you should be able to deal with Army because physically you should be a little bit more imposing.
Well, and you know that, right? You don't lose a fight to a little guy, right?
Yes, exactly.
That doesn't happen where we came from. So,
no.
And that's the thing. 2 words: assignment football.
Yes, I agree.
That's what you have to do on defense. Your players have to be disciplined enough. When your defensive end or the safety or whoever has that responsibility for the quarterback, if he turns his back to you, what can you not do? You can't chase down the line of scrimmage.
Exactly.
You're going to come upfield and hold. Because I always say this on bootlegs. When I see this, it drives me crazy. When you see the quarterback turn his back to you and you can't see the ball, assume that he has it and he's going to roll back to you. So if you come upfield, you're waiting for him. Let someone else make the tackle on that side of the ball. Let your linebackers, let the play side do it. But if he comes back your way, then you're in position. You get upfield. You force him to stay in the pocket. That changes how you play bootlegs and what the ultimate outcome will be.
I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, sometimes we try and complicate a simple matter. But as you said, when that quarterback turns his back, you better stay at home. You better know where your lane is because the next thing you know, you're going to overrun the play or you're not going to be in a position to make a play. And you're right, man. We don't see bootlegs enough, but when they work, that's because somebody didn't do their job or didn't stay at home. So I'm anxious to see how that works for Missouri defensively. Offensively, we got a quarterback competition going, and I like it. I mean, I know Eli talked a lot of times about trusting Bazelak a little bit more than the other guys. Well, the other guys have been there, like Macon's been there since January, all right? So my thing is, in the times we saw him, he showed flashes of being a guy that might be the next guy. I think throwing an open competition right now is the best thing he could do, because if he didn't, he's going to lose at least one quarterback, if not two, to the transfer portal, if it's not a fair opportunity to compete for the job.
Yeah. And listen, it's a bowl game. You don't have any other opponents after that. You don't risk anything by starting Tyler Macon. Give him a chance to run the offense, or if it's Brady Cook, whoever, or maybe you split time, give each guy a half to work with. I wouldn't be opposed to that, because I think we do need to see what they can do once they know that they don't have the threat of someone else yanking them. If you just say, this is your game plan.
Yeah.
You've got this quarter and you've got you got this half and you got this half. I would prefer to see them play full halves instead of, alternating each quarter. And then they know, so they can prepare for that. And you can adjust, obviously, if you need to beyond that. It wouldn't necessarily be a knock against Bazelak if he doesn't play in this game. He's been gimpy, he's been hurt, and he's not playing with a lot of confidence right now. Obviously, that could change during these next couple of weeks while they prepare for Army. But I kind of would like to see the young guys play, especially Macon. I want to see, what he can do once he knows that he's running that offense, and he gets 3 weeks to prepare for a game.
That's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. We're going to take a break. The playoffs are here. We're going to get into what's the right number and a few other things. So stand by. We're coming back after this.
Every day, Ameren, Illinois works to deliver reliable energy throughout the state to on-the-go families, in-the-know grandparents, and busy students. But did you know we also have ways to manage your energy? Paperless billing, outage notifications, pick a due date, auto pay, and so much more. So no matter who you are or how you use your energy, there's an option that's right for you. Learn more at amerenillinois.com/options.
Welcome back to Huddle Up with Howard. Howard, a couple other things before we get to the playoff expansion. One thing, and you touched on this regarding the quarterbacks getting a half. When you have a ball control offense like Army has, you have to be careful here, because you may only get the ball once, maybe in a quarter. So I agree, you better spread it out a little bit and give a guy a full half. And maybe in that going in that fourth quarter, maybe you just kind of say, I'm going to go with the hot guy. I'm going to go with the guy who got us to where we're at, if there is a hot guy.
If there is a hot guy.
So I think there's a lot of fun things that we're going to see. And I think your point about, hey, this is the only game on the schedule, so let's just let it all hang out. I think that's the best approach they can have right now, as far as being able to not only dictate what they're going to do in this particular game, but certainly build a foundation for next year as they have incoming people and people coming back. And I think it's fun. I think it's a lot of fun. Now, with that said, the one person we haven't talked about is Tyler Beatty. Were you surprised that he was not a member of the foursome for the Heisman Trophy selection?
Surprised and disappointed.
Yeah.
And I say that because, listen, we know the quality of the Southeastern Conference. And if you can get through the gauntlet of a 12-game schedule, and you're leading the nation in rushing, or I guess he was probably second in the nation, but you lead the conference in rushing. That, to me, that accounts for something. It's just like, if you're a team that wins the championship game, you're in the playoff.
Right.
To me, it should, I don't know. I just think he should have been there, especially in the way he did it. 5 200-yard rushing games this season. But, listen, there are misses. The guy's going to get his due one day. He'll be playing in the National Football League and making a ton of money next year. But, the best thing I can say about Tyler Beatty, or among all the superlatives that you can throw out about him, and we've seen a lot of guys decide to sit out their bowl games. He has opted to play. Now, I don't know how much he will play, But I think it just speaks about, how he feels about his team, and the guys that got him there. I think he feels that he owes it to his teammates to at least be ready to play. And that just speaks to the type of person that he is. And you listen to people say, oh, yeah, he shouldn't play. He's got too much risk. Dude, well, then why play all season? Why play in your last game? I could beat that argument all day long. But I think it just speaks to the type of player and person and the high character guy that he is. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't think he'll play more than a quarter or a half because you got some other running backs that you need to look at.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad you brought that up because the next subject I wanted to bring up is playoff expansion. Every year we have people who are on the outside looking in saying, we got to expand this thing. I'm sure people at Ohio State and Oklahoma State would say, hey, Notre Dame would all say, we deserve a shot at this thing. My question is A, how many more teams do you want to expand it by? B, you're going to get to a point where you're going to be playing as many games as an NFL schedule. And C, physically, how did these kids hold up? Because not only are they playing and practicing and going to school, I mean, I just don't know if they can hold up. And to your final point about Beatty staying, what kind of impact from a draft perspective would this have on a kid who played an entire season? And then, oh, by the way, we'd like for you to come to the combine. I think the risk of injury is heightened more if you expand this thing. And for those blue chip players who have plans on playing on Sunday, they really have to stop and think about how far they want to go.
It's a good argument, and it can go either way. The other thing is you can look at, say, a guy like Tyler Beatty, who's not the largest running back we've seen. He goes about 5'9", 5'10", maybe if he's on his tiptoes. But, he packed on a lot of weight in the offseason, built it with muscle, and proved that he could hold up under that grind. Playing those additional games, I think what it does from a beneficial standpoint, it speaks to the durability of a player. The National Football League expanded its season to 17 games. They took away a preseason game, but so it's really about the same. But then you get to see how a guy can hold up under those conditions. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing is, I know they would ultimately be playing more games, and the one concern about expanding the season is, hey, these are student athletes. They got to go to class. How do we do this? Well, maybe you could back the season up and start 2 weeks. Yeah, start 2 weeks into August. I mean, the NFL preseason's already there. You don't have the risk of school. So really nothing changes.
What about taking one of the blood donors off the schedule?
Listen, I'm all for that. All for that. I just don't think we should be playing those games. There's no benefit, in my opinion, unless you're playing all younger players to see what kind of depth you have. But then people aren't going to show up to see that. They want to see your frontline players on the field. So I'm a big proponent of getting rid of those blood donor games and just listen. We play all SEC schedule for all I'm concerned because then that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, it's like the NFL. Yeah. You're playing the best competition, which improves your status. When you start talking about playoff teams and experience and strength of schedule and all that.
I think what I'd like to see, you kill the blood donor game. You either play a regional opponent, whether it's Missouri, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, or you play a team in a comparable conference. So let's say you finish third place in the SEC. Then you have the options to play the third place team in the Big Ten, third place team in the ACC, or the Big 12, if there's going to be one. I mean, I would like to see that because, again, comparable conference, comparable competition, and people would probably be more interested in that compared to watching East Toenail State, Wesleyan, North. I mean, it's just nobody cares about those games except the alums or the legacy parents who's got little Johnny the Fourth who's on the team, not going to play a lot, so maybe he gets some snaps against one of the blood donors. But at the end of the day, it doesn't serve a purpose. You don't make any money. You don't have a good fan turnout, And, the fact that you go out and hang 60 on somebody doesn't really prove much, because the following week you're going to play somebody who's much better and will really put you in the place that maybe you deserve to be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams have the tendency to play down to their competition.
Yeah.
So to the point that you don't really get to see, like, you walk away, okay, nothing against Southeast Missouri State, but what did Missouri gain by playing that game? What do we see? Well, we did see a few weaknesses that got exposed, but it doesn't give you a real picture of what this team's going to look like down the road. We all know that early in the season, especially in college football, that teams just aren't very sharp. And it's just the nature of the business. But if you're playing stiffer competition, I think you learn a lot more about your football team early on, sooner rather than later.
Take another break. Be back after this.
At St. Louis Acura and Alden Toyota, we are proud of our dedication to service, and we continue to serve our community. From now until December 12th, bring a new unwrapped toy from Marine Corps Reserve, Toys for Tots, to support 323 Marines who in 2020 collected toys for over 78,000 children. Drop off at either St. Louis Acura or Alden Toyota. St. Louis Acura and Alden Toyota, becoming better than ever for you.
Final segment with Huddle Up with Howard, and we touched on this early about coaches moving around. And it's one of those things where we're seeing incredible money being thrown at these guys to go in and try and save a program or bring back the glory days, whatever you want to call it. So there's a couple of things I look at here. We always talk about the head coach, but what about those assistants, those coordinators, those position guys? They have to uproot their families if they get invited to come with that coach, or if you're at Notre Dame where Marcus Freeman was able to basically retain everybody, that's a comforting situation. But when we talk about coaches moving around, we're not just talking about one guy. We're talking about 10, 12 other people and their families and the other people that come with it. It is a very challenging and dicey time for coaches, especially with the signing date being moved up. Guys don't have a lot of time to think about where the next stop's going to be because the interview process is on and kicking.
Yeah, those are great points. And a lot of coaches, in many cases, what they will do if they've got a family, will choose to leave that family behind if they've got young children that are still in school, especially if it's a school district that they like or a particular, parochial school, Catholic school, whatever case may be. Instead of uprooting them and moving them to a whole new environment, which often can cause some difficulties in learning and adjusting. But it's tough on families. It truly is, especially those with younger children. And in a lot of ways, it's easier to do it that way for some, not for others. If you've moved on to the next school, the family's taken care of back at the other place, and you can just focus on, getting your players ready. You don't have to worry about putting kids to bed at night and reading them bedtime stories. But by the same token, there are those that really rely on their families and love having them there with them. So, there are pluses and minuses to both of those scenarios. But either way, it's not just as easy as, hey, I'm out, I'm going to the next school and everything will be all hunky-dory. It's just not that simple. And in a case like Brian Kelly, he's going to start with an entirely new staff. And your assistant coaches matter. It's not just you as the head coach, because in a lot of cases, this, the head coach acts more like a CEO and doesn't do as much on-field coaching. Now that varies from place to place, but choosing assistants is a big deal, and you've got to get it right away, especially at an institution like LSU where Brian Kelly's going to go.
Well, you touch on something about the assistants, and I think Kelly's in deep shit already. Okay, he didn't get anybody to come with him. He brought in the guy who used to be the top recruiter at LSU, and I think that's the only thing that may help him. But because when you start talking about assistants, the first person you better hire somebody to go get you some players.
That's right.
And if you don't do that, you're in trouble. And then go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, but and what that means for people that don't understand it, recruiting is area knowledge, knowing the high school coaches. A lot of times, it's knowing those families. You've got to be in those communities and have a presence. You got to build trust among the players and the families and the coaches. And if you can't do that, your recruiting will not be successful.
No, and you don't have that kind of time like you used to.
Yeah.
You know how they say, well, you got to give them 3 or 4 years to turn things around. Well, no, wait a minute. This is LSU. This is the SEC. We already got good players. We already have good players here. We just need a few more, and we just need a different voice. I think the way Kelly has gotten off on the wrong foot, and I think a lot has to do with, I don't think Notre Dame was really excited about him at the end. He broke Rockney's record, and that was kind of unwritten rule. Nobody breaks Rockney's record, which is why we've seen some other guys leave early. Then he goes down. Here's a guy from Massachusetts trying to sound like he's from the Bayou. I mean, there was so many things wrong with him. And then you hear the stories about how he treated some of his assistants back in the day, having them shovel snow for his holiday party and park cars.
I need some mulch over here.
Exactly. I mean, so he's not what you call the most endearing person. And, we saw them gas a coach who won the national championship 2 years ago.
Yes.
So they don't have any time for excuses. They want to be able to compete again. And I think the same thing can be said at Oklahoma. It's going to be said at USC. All those schools with tradition, they don't give you the 3-4 year window. If they don't see improvement after 2, then, there's going to be some changes made. And now what we see is head coaches, they fire an assistant in the middle of the season to buy themselves a little bit more time. I've never seen so many assistants get canned during the season that we did this season in college football. I've never seen it before, and I think it just shows you the pressure that the head coach is under.
Yeah, we saw it in a number of places. We saw it at Mizzou, saw it at Florida. How much did it really help? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And in the case of Missouri, I think it helped a little bit by when they decided to fire the defensive line coach Jethro Franklin, who'd only been there 8 or 9 months. And then they've all but elevated Al Davis to be the new defensive line coach as of a couple of days. As of Sunday, he had an offer to become Mizzou's next defensive line coach. Maybe by now he's wrapped that all up. But at Florida, Florida fired its a well-known defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, and an offensive line coach, John Hapsey. Those guys have been in the industry for a long time. But listen, it comes down to wins and losses, and if you're not getting it done, they'll wave bye-bye to you. I mean, you just mentioned the whole thing with LSU and Ed Ogeron. Like, hey, what have you done for us lately? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and in the coming weeks, we're going to visit with a couple of agents, Bob Lattenville, who's represented a number of college coaches and also universities, and get into this very fact about contracts and how they work. And when you wave bye-bye, how much is it going to actually cost you? A lot of different scenarios in this new field. So here's a question for you. With what we see universities paying coaches, and you see how the NFL works, what's the safer job? The pressure of recruiting and getting 18-year-old kids to listen to you, or the fact that you got such multiple layers in the NFL, player personnel, general manager, president of football operations, and all the other titles, a very aggressive media, grown men who in some cases you can't talk to anymore. Who's got the better gig right now? Because the money's almost the same.
I think really being an NFL coach is easier because you take the recruiting element out of it. You've got guys that are sitting in meeting rooms all day. They're being paid to do a particular job. They don't have to worry about going to class. All they got to do is be professionals and show up on Sundays and hone their skills if they're committed to this. I think the NFL game is easier in that regard. Because recruiting is so difficult, and not a lot of coaches have the fortitude, that foundation to be able to go in and talk to in an honest way to someone's mama and daddy and grandma and grandpa and auntie and uncle. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
You get some coaches checking out mama making that apple pie, and you're like, hey, all right. So it has a lot of other distractions to it. There's no doubt about that. But coaching it's a volatile industry, whether it's college or high school or the NFL. It's more volatile than it's ever been.
It's about production. Right. You've got to produce, or you're going to be on the bench someplace.
Yeah, and if you're an athletic director or a general manager, you probably get 2 hires. And if it's not working after the second one, then guess what? They're saying bye-bye to you as well. And it's changed so much in where we're going. So final question for you, Marcus Freeman, 35 years old, played in the NFL. Well, he was in a lot of camps. Mm-hmm. Good player at Ohio State, man of color. Where does this take coaches now where we're seeing guys who are people of color that are maybe being considered more? You and I had a great conversation off the air last week about Bieniemy. And I really think if it wasn't for the fact that he would have had to have left immediately because recruiting now requires that, he would have been a good find for Notre Dame, especially the fact because of what he's been able to do on the NFL level. But I started thinking about the fact that maybe if he was on a bad team, maybe he would have left. But, it's Kansas City. And, Kansas City could easily find themselves deep in the postseason or if not back in the Super Bowl. A very unique situation. But down the road, do you see more coaches of color getting these opportunities?
I hope so. Listen, there are a lot of coaches of color that can get the job done flat out. And all they do is need an opportunity, mm-hmm. And listen, the NFL, you just look at the cross section of players. Okay. How do you not justify that these, if you've got a majority that are African-Americans, I think that the breakdown is like 70% in the National Football League. Why couldn't a person of color be successful? We already have seen at least 2 men of color win Super Bowls, right? Tony Dungy, Mike Tomlin. So listen, and, it's about time to give qualified coaches the ability to show that they can do the job. Well, we already know that they can do the job. They just need the right opportunities.
I agree. All right, man, we're out of time for today. It's been fun. We invite everybody to check us out next week. We're going to have a fun guest to visit with and talk some more football as we huddle up with Howard Richards. It's always good to see you, sir, and we appreciate the time. And when do you head out for where are we playing that game at?
It will be Amon Carter Stadium, home of the TCU Horned Frogs in Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth, and I bet 1 or 2 people in that neck of the woods.
A few. Leaving on Tuesday, December 21st. The game's on the 22nd at 7 p.m.
All right. Well, I'll be watching, and I'll be talking to you well before then. He's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. It's been Huddle Up with Howard here on Claves Online. We thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. But first,
the only thing faster than this supersonic golf cart are the closing times at thehomeloanexpert.com. Mortgage rates are in the 2s, and we have a 21-day closing guarantee. Apply online today at thehomeloanexpert.com.
So you're going to Memphis?